I got to do this. According to the American Heritage Dictionary, 1828. Now, if you looked up the word truth, we doing okay, Jose? You keeping up with me, brother? Okay, here's on it. Okay. What if I did this? Okay, all right. Sorry. Now, if you looked up the word truth in a modern dictionary, you'd have 2 full columns of nonsense. As a matter of fact, you would have to look up every other word in the dictionary that's in the explanation of what truth is. Try it, I guarantee you, like the guy that sells cheap suits. I guarantee you. But if you go back to some of the early periods of the modern English language, the further you go back, the clearer things get. Back then they said the truth is that which is in exact accordance to that which is, which has been, or which shall be. Hear me put it to you another way. The truth in 1828, according to Noah Webster, the father of the modern English language, was one of the titles of our Father. He who was and is and which shall be. It's his way of saying, if it's true now, it was true in the past, and it'll be true tomorrow. And that's why Yeshua said, I am the same yesterday, because one of his titles, I am the way, the truth, and the life. That's what truth used to be. Now let's get the modern views. National Academy of Science. In science, a fact typically, let's stop right there. Right there, that's their way of saying, this is what a fact used to be. This is what science used to be. It refers to an observation, that's right. Something that is true scientifically was something you could observe and repeat in a controlled environment. That's what it used to be. It used to be observation. Why? Because that fact was based upon the Scriptures. Because in the Scriptures, we are trained from the very beginning to observe and to look for signs. So that's why the New Testament, 1 Corinthians, says that the Jews look for a sign. All right? Now, some people consider that to be a negative comment. It's not really. They're supposed to look for the signs. They were supposed to respond to the signs, right? Okay? That's why Yeshua said, I gave you all these signs, and you didn't believe the signs. So when you see the signs, you got to believe the sign, okay? That's why we did that test, right? Okay. Got to believe the signs. Hey, I just love life. It's just a good thing, okay? And so now we've turned observation into math. Now there's something to be said for math, but we've been trying to use math to predict the Messiah's second coming, at least in the years of my life on this planet. 50 of these predictions have come and 50 have all gone using math. All right? Well, we add this to this, and when Israel was a nation in 1947, and then we added to this and subtracted from Ezekiel laid on this side, and then he laid on this side. Subtract 1,230 days minus 1,245 days, and you come up with May 21st, ... Okay? All those have come and gone. And some of you know my theory is that it's quite possible that the reason why he hasn't come based on this is because we're just not good at math. Perhaps somebody forgot to carry the one. I'm not sure. But to verify that, to check me out, go home and Google the United States position in the world in math. And every one that you see in the United States will be out of 50 will either be 49 or 50. And guess who's always number one? China. China is always number one. You know why they are? You know why? Where are most of the prophetic predictions coming from? Not the Chinese. Why? They're good at math. Just my theory. May not be true, Bill, but just my theory. But the reason why I say this is happening is because we've gone from simple observation to the math thing, not only as a culture, because we went from Nikola Tesla, who was observation, to Einstein, who was all math. And so now all the particle physicists in the universe are all in step, perfect step with Einstein. And they condemn and mock those whose experiments are by observation and repeated in a laboratory condition rather than math. And we're doing the same thing. National Center for Science Education. In science, an observation that has been repeatedly confirmed and for all practical purposes is accepted as true. So far, so good. Truth in science, however, is never final, and what is accepted as fact today may be modified or even discarded tomorrow. This is what our young people are learning in university, that a fact or truth or science can change. It may be true today, but it may not be true tomorrow. Vocabulary.com, an observation, this is science truth, an observation that has been confirmed repeatedly and accepted as true, although its truth is never final. How about Richard Dawkins? A fact can never be more than a hypothesis on probation. A hypothesis that has so far withstood all attempts to falsify. Now we're all switching things over. Why are they switching it over this? Because they realize the observation is contradicting everything they've been teaching us about how far galaxies are away, planets are away from us, all based basically singularly on one thing. The general and special theories of relativity, i.e. E equals mc squared. Mostly based upon those things. And Einstein, before he died, you know, a lot of people start to confess to a lot of things just before they pass away. It's an interesting thing how we are as humans. All of a sudden, sometimes in those months preceding that, including Charles Darwin, people start to fess up. Okay? And he said before he died, he says, there's two things that will contradict my general and special theories of relativity. And that is if the speed of light is not constant, is number one. If the speed of light is not constant, then everything goes down the tubes. Now, why would that be important to us? Because we have people telling us that galaxies are billions of light years away. Based upon what? Speed of light. Now, obviously, if the speed of light is slowing down, which Barry Sutterfield and people like that have discovered several decades ago, that everybody's been to concede now. But see, do you get that in the papers? No. You get the speed of light is constant, 186,000 blah, blah, blah miles per second. But it's slowing down, which means what? 10,000 years ago, it was much faster. Now that makes a huge difference. Even if it slowed down a little bit over 6,000 to 10,000 years, that's why a lot of physicists are saying that if the speed of light is slowing down, it's possible that all those galaxies we see way out there 10,000 years ago were very close to us, and they were stretched out exponentially the way they are now. Not all things being equal. Okay, in an equal pattern. See, that's what they assume. They assume things are far away because they know how fast speed of light is now, and you just back that up. But if it was a lot faster then, you see where I'm coming from. These are the kind of things that I'm trying to do with the youth groups, just in case Yeshua doesn't come next Tuesday. Just in case all of our predictions are wrong again. What if our young people, what if you and I sitting right here, hon? What if we live out all our days? And what if our children live out all their days? It's only hypothetical. I know that bums everybody out, and everybody wants to grow a horn out of their head and get all upset. But we've been doing this for a long time now, and every time we in the search to figure out, to pinpoint exactly when he's going to come, we completely destroy the generation we're in. And we've been doing it generation after generation. Okay. Webster's Unabridged Encyclopedic Dictionary says that which actually exists, reality or truth. So they're not even in concord with the modern Webster's Dictionary. Very important quote. I understand this man is a deist now. He was a strict atheist when he said that. But what he's about to say is interesting because he's from UC Berkeley. That should be one of our clues right there, okay? UC Berkeley. One who claims to be a skeptic of a certain set of beliefs is actually a true believer of another set of beliefs. Why am I bringing this up? Because most atheists and evolutionists, remember, that's what we're talking about tonight. So if you're mad at me because I'm not spewing out a bunch of Hebrew tonight, I'm sorry. Okay? I'm dealing with another issue. But because atheists and leftists are trained that they're not prejudiced and they're not biased. They don't have any presuppositional thoughts or beliefs about anything. As a matter of fact, most atheists believe that they come from the town of Neutralville, or Rational Town or something like that. In other words, we're not swayed by religious primitive ideals and stuff like that. And we just balance out all the facts because we're critical thinkers and you are not. Okay? That's their thinking. Liberals, leftists think they're better than you are. And that's the problem. You can't get anywhere with them because they already assume something. And that comes from the next quote. Leo Tolstoy. Some of you may be familiar with Leo Tolstoy. A Russian writer, later became a believer. If you Google greatest intellectual elites of all time, he will be on every list. A brilliant writer from Russia. Here's what he said. The most difficult subjects can be explained to the most slow-witted man if he has not formed any idea of them already. But the simplest thing cannot be made clear to the most intelligent man if he is firmly persuaded that he knows everything already without a shadow of doubt that which is laid before him. So true that is. Reason why you can't even teach the intellectual elite the simplest little thing is because he's made up his mind already. He's not even listening to you. For one, like I said, most conservative thinkers and think tanks that I know of spend a whole lot of time learning listening to liberals speak, their ideals, and all the things, their critical thinking process. Very rarely is it the other way around. The argument concerning science, there is no evidence that God exists. Now let me stop here. So it's really getting down to the science now. Do we need? I'm just going to let you know right now. I'm going to 9:30. We're going to go one more hour. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. It reminds me of the end of most Seinfeld shows. I know you're here, so I'm just kidding. Okay. Yeah, we can go another hour, can't we? If you need to do what you need to do, go ahead and do what you need to do. If you need to get coffee, bring me a cup. That's all I ask. Argument concerning science. Now remember, this is really no argument at all. But that's what they think. They think that science contradicts the Bible and God. And I'm going to suggest to you, a lot of people that think that fall in probably both categories. Generally speaking, they don't know much about the Bible, and they don't even know that much about science. Because they're just passing down the same thing that they learned in university. You know, I speak at University of Louisiana or someplace like that, and I would get done. I think I was doing the in my flesh I see God thing, your DNA and how that operates, and the words, the language written on your DNA, and these couple of guys come up, look like about in their 40s and 50s or something, and said, I have a degree in biology. As a matter of fact, I have a master's in biology, and you know, I never heard anything like this, and I'd like to know where some of you get your. And after you talk to him, you realize that he got a degree in biology, but for 30 years he's been working at Starbucks. Okay? And what do I mean by that? I'm not trying to mock. I'm just trying to say he hasn't been keeping up. This stuff is changing day by day almost. He's still spewing out what he learned in the 1960s or 1970s. And even most evolutionists will tell you, we don't go for anything Darwin said. You can't quote Darwin to an evolutionist anymore because they're way past that. Okay? So most of them are keeping up with it. But people who are not, you can detect it because they'll start defending Darwin. When they passed that up a long time ago. In other words, or how do you know God exists? My usual answer is by the same means in which we know anything we cannot see exist. The evidence, the facts. Because no one was there to observe the creation. And so I asked them this. Now some of you have heard me say this before. And I really would like to offer someone $1 for getting me a cup of coffee. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, no. $2 or 2 cups of coffee? Okay. Right into blackmail. I get it. I get it. Here's the first thing I say to them. When they say, how do you know God exists? As a matter of fact, Stephen, there's a consensus. How many of you know who Michio Kaku is? You know me? He's the Japanese guy that's all over the TV. Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's a man of color that has taken over Carl Sagan and all those kind of people. He's actually the only one of the ones that I really like, because even though he hates God, doesn't have anything to do with him, he's funny. He's got a good sense of humor, isn't he? He's just a funny guy. And as I enjoy someone, even if they don't agree with me, as long as they don't take themselves too seriously. I guess what I'm saying. Okay, Michio Kaku, Stephen Hawking, Richard Dawkins. The consensus of all three of them is simply this. The reason why we don't believe in God is because we are scientists, and we work by observation, Liar, liar, pants on fire. Okay, but anyway, we go by observation, and because we cannot see God, we cannot believe in God. And so the first thing I ask him is, well, sir, can I ask you a question? Do you believe in atoms? And if they're keeping up with science, and I'm hoping Mr. Dawkins and the bunch are, I'm sure they are, then they know that they can't answer affirmative to that question. No man has ever seen an atom. As I'm speaking to you right now, no man has ever seen an atom. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Oh, yeah, well, we haven't seen them with the naked eye. No, we haven't seen an atom even with the strongest microscopes. Classic case in point, 2004, Live Science article on the internet. 2004. Remember that number. Man can now see an atom through a scanning, tunneling microscope. And everybody goes, until you read what the article actually says. Okay? And when you read the article, you realize, I have a picture of it here, I'm going to show you in a minute. You realize that they're talking about a computer image of electron interference patterns and so forth. No man's actually seen an atom yet. All right? Now, why do I bring this up? Because the first thing I say to them is, excuse me, you reject God because you can't see him. You know where I'm going with this, don't you? But yet you stake your whole reputation, your lives, your family, and everybody you know on something you have never personally seen either. And so if you ask them the fair question, and if they answer correctly, they'll say, when you say, well, then how do you know atoms exist? And they'll say, because we see the effects of atoms. Now, that's true. That's exact. We do see the effects of atoms. And so that it is a correct answer. So one of the things I want you to see is that in 2004, when it says man cannot see an atom, what did that article just admit? That before 2004, they hadn't seen an atom, right? Did they just not admit it? Of course they did, because they're saying now we see an atom. But when you actually get down to it, this is what you see. I'm going to jump ahead. Looks like I'm going to jump ahead a lot. I look like Rico Cortez up here, I guess. Yeah. Oh, Lucy, Lucy, Lucy. Okay, here it is, right here. That's CERN Lab, Geneva, Switzerland. Every time I speak in Switzerland, I go to that lab because I just have this fascination with the whole God particle CERN thing, all right? Here's the unique thing about atoms, real atoms. They don't have pixels. Okay, that's your first clue. When you see pixels, what does that mean? That means it's a computer image. Looks much nicer on your monitor here, for those of you who see the monitors. That means it's either a computer image or they took a photo off the TV or something, okay? They're not actually looking at the atom, they're looking at the shadow, what they call the shadow of an atom. And what they're saying is, we know what that which you can't see is doing by that which produces the shadow. We observe the shadow, and then we know what that which we cannot see is doing. Isn't it interesting that Paul said, with respect to the Sabbath, the festivals, the feasts, and the dietary laws, that these are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Messiah? And what do religious teachings say to that? Well, the shadow is the Torah, and that is true, and the Torah was done away with. Well, if the shadow's done away with, how do you know what's coming? Now listen to what he said again. But these are a shadow of things to come. So if you throw out the shadow, how do you know what's coming? Once again, you can't teach the simplest thing to the religious intellectual elite. What's the natural creation, the birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees and the physical universe, got to do with theology in the Bible? It has everything to do with it. And that's why I started with that testimony. Okay, now back up to where I was. Now I am going to pull a Rico here. I want to tell the library story. It says, this is just my notes, by the way. You guys are looking at the notes, so I'll just bring it up and explain it as much as I can. The library story. The library story goes like this. When I went to secular college back whatever it was, I went to Southeast Missouri State University because I'm from the boot heel of Missouri. And first semester, my father did a wonderful thing. Now, as a kid with a head full of mush, And I'm telling this part because we can relate it to our relationship with the Father. How can I say that? Because the Bible says in order to enter the kingdom, you must become as a little child. So the most important relationship we have with the Creator is Papa, Abba, Father. So as a child, when my father said to me, you are going to pay, I'm going to pay for the first semester, you're going to pay for all the rest, I thought he was the most evil, cruel person on the planet. Here I am later, all these years later, and my father was a whole lot smarter than I thought he was. Okay? Just think of the Father as our... See, sometimes we judge him as just little snot-nosed kids with heads full of mush, is the bottom line. So anyway, I got a job in the library at Southeast Missouri State. It was a humongous library, probably even bigger than Columbia, Mizzou. But it was a very large library, and they would lock me in at 11 o'clock at night, and they would let me out at 7 o'clock in the morning. Which the ACLU would be all over their case today, okay? But back those days, it was a little calmer, right? A little calmer back in those days. And so, therefore, I was locked in that building in the library from 11 o'clock, 8 hours a night for 4.5 months. And I realized the first 2 nights I was done doing my job in an hour and a half. I was done. And so some of you who know me would know that I'm just the kind of person that would take me 2 weeks to figure out what could I do with those other 6.5 hours. So it dawned on me, maybe I'll read some books. Okay. I don't know where it came from, but it was like, contemplated my belly button and just revealed it to me. But so I started. So I was already teaching in the Lutheran system when I was 18 or 19. I thought I knew the Bible pretty good, arrogant as kid with a head full of mush. And so I went to the section of the Hindus and the Buddhists and the Taoists and the Shintoists and Islam and Judaism and so forth as well, because I didn't know anything about any of those religions. And I began to pour myself into their documents, and I realized that most every major religion in the world has some sort of book, article, document that reveals what they believe. And as I went through these things, night after night, I began to realize something very consistent with every religious book, including the Bible. Every religious book, including the Bible, makes 2 kinds of statements. One kind about the universe that we can empirically prove or disprove as we're standing here right now. And every religion makes statements in there that you can't prove scientifically, like God loves you, how to get to heaven, how to be saved, like I said, all those kind of things. And as I began to pour through these things, I began to realize that virtually every one of these books, when they tell the creation story, the Bible turns out to be the only book that portrays an accurate scientific explanation, without rebuttal, and a chronology of the beginning of things, a chronology. No other books do that. They're all over the place. Some of the books, for example, the Korean religions believe that time is actually just 3 roosters. Okay, so there's no fourth dimension of time, those kind of things. But time is actually just 3 roosters. Okay, and of course the reason why they believe that is because those guys, crowed every morning when they got up, and so therefore that's time. All right. And I think I've said this before. All the oceans were formed by the urine of the goddesses. Okay, this is Hinduism. And so as you begin to read, they make the most absurd statements about cosmology and geology and geography and biology. And so I came to this conclusion, all except the Bible. I came to this conclusion. Maybe you guys can see my logic here. Remember down on country common sense. If the statements that their God makes about the world scientifically are not true, then what foundation do I have to believe the statements that can't be proved scientifically? Did everybody follow me on that? If their God doesn't know about the universe, then what foundation do I have to believe all the things he says that you can't prove? Like I love you, and how do you get to heaven? I didn't have any foundation. But with the Bible I did. I had a reason to be able to trust him that he loves me. A reason to trust when he says, this is how you enter in my presence, and so on and so forth. Why? Because the statements he made about the universe are true. And that's why I'm suggesting to you that if I skipped one, sorry. Let's skip it and go on. Okay, let's talk about glowing generalities. The point being is that gave me my foundation to believe these things. Most people, most atheists use what's called glittering generalities. I don't think we're going to get to the ontological part, guys. Is that okay? We'll just stick with the scientific part, okay? Unless you guys want to stay till midnight, okay? Okay. The reason I'm bringing this up is because this is a very something you see all the time, politically and religiously. It's what I learned in business, my early business classes, called a glowing or glittering generality. Basically, this is a lot of hoopla, basically, to say that it's a phrase that people say that gets everybody all emotionally stirred up without a lick of evidence. That's a glowing generality, right? So I want to we do this, we all do this, so I'm not pointing the fingers at everybody else. I find myself doing these kind of things. I just believe there's two kinds of people in the world, those who realize they're doing it and those who don't, okay? Sometimes I say something, I got to stop and go, oop, I just used a glittering generality. Let me give you some examples. The Bible is full of errors. I hear people say that all the time. Now, see, people who agree with that get all excited about that when they're in a speech and they're up on the platform and they say that, yeah, we've known that for... Where's the evidence? Nobody presents any evidence that the Bible is full of errors. They just say that over and over and over again. Pretty soon people begin to believe it. How about this? There is no evidence of David, Abraham, Saul, Sodom, or Jericho. When the reality is, all those characters and all those places have been dug up out of the ground, some more than 50 years ago. But does the public hear it? No. The only thing the public knows is watching History Channel. Okay? And so many people know as a matter of fact, my kids would admit that. They get their history from the History Channel. Some of you well know I've been on the History Channel a couple of times, and I know what their agenda is. And it ain't history. Okay, we'll just leave that where it is right now. Okay, I would recommend that you get a book called Etched in Stone. Etched in Stones, written by a woman. I can't remember her name. Go to WorldNet Daily. For those of you who are familiar with WorldNet Daily, you can go there and get it. The reason why I'm recommending this book as far as apologetics and defending the faith is because a lot of people believe that the Bible's not valid because they've been taught things like, none of these characters ever been found anywhere, man. Okay? Ain't nobody ever found Jericho. Everybody don't know where it's at. Okay? They don't actually talk like that. I'm doing that hoping that Bill Cloud's watching this video. Okay. But etched in stone, because if you get on the internet, you could spend weeks and weeks and days finding one bit of evidence over here and one article over here. If you search long enough, you can find them. But this woman spent years gathering all the evidence of all the places and put them in one book. I highly recommend it. And I'm going to get a hold of Joseph Farah and say, hey, I need some money. I'm promoting this. Okay, never mind. How about this one? There are books added to the Bible. How about there are books missing from the Bible? See, I hear people say that all the time. Give me an example. Give me your evidence of how you know that there's books that are missing from the Bible, or how you know that there's books that are there that shouldn't be there. How about this one? The president is a racist, a homophobe. I hear that all the time. And when it's in a speech, everybody goes flipping nuts. Right? Does anybody offer any evidence? I haven't heard one bit of evidence, okay? Now, I think Trump's a loon sometimes, okay? But if you really get past that veneer and look at what the platform he's working with and what he's trying to accomplish, but see, you're not going to get that if you just watch the liberal media. We're such pawns in this because it's both sides, my friends. Conservatives do it to liberals, liberals do it to conservatives, and we are caught in the middle of this little scam. There's a whole lot of things I'd like to do, but we don't have time to do it. But once again, under what constitutes evidence or proof, that's the first thing we need to deal with. When an atheist approaches you, because in the series I actually say, this is what you say to them when they say this, instead of just making general statements about things, and you still don't know what to say when someone says it to you. So when someone says to me what constitutes evidence or proof, that's the first thing I say. Well, what is proof to you? Tell me what I could say to you, or what evidence that you would see that would make you believe that there's a God. And of course, virtually every time they'll say, if I could see him. Remember we talked about that earlier, if I could see it. Well, see, you tear down that assumption right off the bat. That's why I'm saying when you're having a discussion with someone, you've got to satisfy your first premise first, because they'll lead you down the rosy path of 50 different directions saying, what about this, and what about that, and what about this, and what about that? And the next thing you know, you can't answer those questions, so that with the next person they go to, they go back to what they started with. The same premise, because no one ever concluded their first premise. And so this happens all the time. Some people say the Scriptures are not a history book, and they're not. The Scriptures are not a science book. However, all things the Scriptures have to say about all those things will be accurate and validated, or the author of the Scripture, God, is ignorant at best and deceptive at worst, and we might as well worship ourselves. In other words, my hobby, okay, I'm not a physicist, I just play one on TV or something, okay, but that's kind of my hobby, if you will. It's what I like to do because I see the relationship between the Hebrew language and all this stuff that's going on. And I'm just thinking to myself, if God doesn't know anything about the universe, I know a little bit, well, then I might as well be God. You know what I mean? If he doesn't know these things. The thinking box evidence doesn't fit. We don't have time to do that. I did the prophecy thing, but they've solved that problem. They can't deal with that anymore. And the reason why I bring that up is because I remember I gave this same thing to my boss. This is like 40 years ago when I was working in the oil field. Pardon me? Oh, yes, I was. 4 years ago. Yeah, I used my own words against me. Go ahead. Okay, I was giving him these prophecies. And when I said the chances of, I think I said one cell, is 10 with 45 zeros behind it. And this is what he said. So there is a chance. And so that's what I mean. Now they've got something that they can use with respect to that, because now, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of hard-working physicists out there that are going to tell them that this whole multi-universe thing is nonsense too. All right? And which is what's being taught right now, that there's multi-universes out there, there's multitudes of existences, and so therefore you can't prove anything anymore if you're dealing with the universes that you're not in and you're not part of, so you can't observe them. That's an easy way, gutless way, easy gutless way to get out of it. What do you do with myriads of scientists who believe because of the evidence? What do you do with 50 scientists over here who all believe that evolution is nonsense, and they have P's and H's and D's behind their name? And they got 50 scientists over here who believe that creation is nonsense, and they get P's and H's and D's behind their name. Which one of the 50 PhDs are the correct 50 PhDs? But they have an answer for this. I'm just letting you know ahead of time so you can deal with these things. It's what I call the Al Gore response. When Al Gore was given a list of over 150 scientists with PhDs that think that climate change is absolute nonsense and a scam, Al Gore said, they're not real scientists. That's their answer. Well, they're not real scientists. And we do this in all other areas of our life as well. Someone who, generally speaking, in our culture, who is Jewish, or in Israeli culture, that is Jewish and believes in Yeshua, is not really a Jew. I hear that all the time. Well, you're not really Jewish. How do they do that? Well, they reject them. You're not my son anymore. Remember the jazz singer Neil Diamond? You're not my son anymore. You're not a Jew anymore. Because they believe in Yeshua, they're not really Jewish. If you're a scientist and you believe, like I said, in creation, then you're not a real scientist. How about this one? If you're black and you're conservative, you're not really black. And you know that. Walter Williams and people like that, brilliant men, okay, can see these things. Because sometimes we're led by the hand in the public. All of us are led by people that don't use that kind of intellect. So what do you do with scientists who believe... first of all, I want to say this before we go on. They'll tell you that science teaches them, but in reality, science is not teaching them anything. Scientists are teaching them. An important distinction. Your atheist friend thinks that he's following science, but he's following his science teacher. He's just doing what a science teacher says, and that may not have anything to do with science, okay? Moving on. We got 30 minutes. Everybody okay? We're going to deal. Okay. While studies have found that scientists tend to be much less religious than the general public, a survey conducted by the Pew Research Center, not biblical, for people in the press found that just over half of scientists, 51%, believe in some form of deity or higher power. I'm quoting them. Specifically, 33% of scientists say they believe in God. Some of the greatest Nobel laureates and pioneers in science believed in God. I'm going to say most of the scientists who came up with the known laws in our universe were Christians. Isaac Newton, Michael Faraday, we could do this all day. Louis Pasteur, all these things. Various kinds of Christians, but nonetheless Christians. Most of the couch potato theories come from the atheists, but all the known laws of the universe come from believers. And so your friend has to know, what do you do with all the Nobel laureates that have all the laws in the universe? 33%, if you will. What do you do with those stats? What would be proof, once again, to be able to see them? We talked about this. We're going to skip some of these things. This is the shadow of an atom that I talked about before. Very important concept here. We got to stop and talk about it. I hope I don't take up the whole half hour. These are the things that I like to talk about. I'm selfish. I'm sorry. Especially when it comes to what Stephen Hawking and see some physicist who works hard is going to counter what Stephen Hawking just proclaimed 2 weeks ago when saying that matter is eternal and that matter comes before information. He knows that matter can't precede information. Information has to precede matter. You have to have information first. You can't start out with matter because you need information to produce the matter. So you can't start out with that. You have to start out with information. Now, information happens to be words. And so what a coincidence that the Bible in John 1:1 says, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word, whoever wrote the Bible seems to know a whole lot more than Stephen Hawking and Neil deGrasse Tyson and people like that. As a matter of fact, it's interesting to me, that's why I put that note up there, that our word information, or words, comes from the Latin word informo. Informo in the Latin means to give form or shape to something. So even the word itself is always testified that is words that are sound frequencies. That's what words are. They're sound frequencies. They're resonating frequencies. Anybody in the scientific field understands that everything in the universe is brought into existence by the energized vibrations of sound. And that everything in the universe is made up of atoms, and in those atoms are protons and neutrons and electrons, in the nucleus are protons and neutrons, and what's flying around the nucleus of the atom? Electrons. So therefore, everything is energized. Everything is moving. Now, you don't see a lot of these things, but everything is moving. And so we know that what makes you who you are is your DNA. Your DNA is a molecule. Now, that's matter. Okay, a molecule is matter. It's just a conglomeration of particular patterns of atoms clustering together to form a molecule. But what makes you who you are is not the matter. It's the information written on the DNA. Now, see, we all know this in the lab until it comes to their theology with all this. And indeed, don't be fooled. Atheists have a theology. It's just that the theo in theology is them. Matter, okay? It's still the same thing. And so it's interesting that the Bible already knew that words have to come first. So when you go to the beginning, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That is in perfect harmony with the physics of the universe. As a matter of fact, if we were in a laboratory right now, we could observe and repeat in a controlled environment what I'm about to say. Now, that's used to be called, if you take a water drop and you put it in a petri dish, doesn't have to be in a petri dish, I'm just adding that for flavor, okay? And you produce just the perfect, right-on, spot-on, resonating frequency of sound, you create the entire spectrum of light in the water drop. I hope I didn't lose anybody there. You take the water, Now that water drop's surrounded by an electromagnetic field. That's why this can happen. Because once you have electrical charges between two things with electromagnetic fields, then you have indeed a field to work with. Just like if you had magnets on a table, if you put them a certain way, they're going to attract to each other. If you turn one over, they're going to repel, right? Now there's a relationship, there's an attraction between the two magnets. You can't see it, but if you throw some iron filings on it, now you can see the electromagnetic field. Well, everything made of mass and matter is surrounded by that electromagnetic field. So if I took water surrounded by the electromagnetic field, produced just the right sound, words, then the entire spectrum of light is in the water drop. Now, in the beginning, it says that God, the Spirit of God, moved upon the face of the waters. Now you got water, right? And then God said, now you got the sound. What's the next thing that happened? Let there be light. That's in perfect harmony with science. So that tells us a couple of things. It tells us whoever wrote that's pretty dang smart. Because it took man a whole lot longer to figure that out when it was revealed right there in the beginning. The second thing we understand about that is you don't need a ball of fire up in the sky to produce light. I remember I was at in Bakersfield, California one time. There's a big crowd of people out there. And as I'm just finished a lecture similar to this, and this guy stands up and he says, ha ha ha, kind of laughs a little bit. And he says, whoever wrote your Bible doesn't know what he's talking about. And everybody started to say something. I said, no, let the man speak. Inside I'm thinking he'll give him, he'll reveal himself, let him speak. And he says, whoever wrote the Bible doesn't know how things work because you can't have light before the sun. And then he giggled a little bit again, okay? It was a very similar circumstance to here. It was like 11 o'clock at night, okay? And I simply said to him, sir, is there light in this building right now? Well, that ended that right there, okay? Not that I'm smarter than anybody else. Once again, it's just good old down-home country common sense. Because he realized that the sun's not shining in the building, just like it isn't right now. And do we have light? Because, see, we need energy. We need energy. You need light quanta, photons and so forth, the smallest quantity of light. That's what you need in order to produce light. You don't need the sun in order to produce light. You need energy. Energy is where we get light from. And so he realized that whoever wrote the Bible did indeed know what he was talking about from the very beginning. So information gives form to matter. Most arguments about the dislike of God are not evidence that there is no God. It's evidence that they don't like God. For example, let me use an example. This is something they may say to your kids. The reason I don't believe in your God is because I look out in the world and I see sin, he wouldn't say sin. I see tragedies and wars and bloodshed and the innocent dying and all kind of evil in the world, which an existential atheist doesn't believe there's any concept of evil. But having said that, that's the reason why I don't believe in your God, because look at this world. So I simply said, you need to turn to them and ask them this. So what do you think brought the universe into existence if it wasn't God? And I say, well, matter. Matter's always been. Matter's what brought this into the world. And then I said, well, why aren't you mad at the natural forces? Now I'm going to say that again. We're looking at the same evidence. You're saying this evil world was brought in by natural forces. Then why aren't you mad at them? Why aren't you writing books against the natural forces? You just confess that because the world is the same evidence, no matter whether you believe God brought it into existence or you believe man brought it into existence. Either way, we're looking at the same evidence. So you just admitted that natural forces caused this evil, despicable world. Why aren't you mad at them? See, they want to blame it on God when we're all looking at the same evidence. So it always goes back to, why did God allow this to happen? It goes back to, they don't give you one lick of proof why there is no God. They only give you evidence why they don't like this God. And that's the reality of atheists. Dr. Werner Gitt, director and professor at the German Federal Institute of Physics and Technology, says, and I quote, there is no known natural law through which matter can give rise to information. Can't work that way, but yet that's what's foisted upon the public, and particularly our next generation, that matter gives rise to information. And they all know that that's not true. There's no phenomena that can do this. Second law of thermodynamics disproves an eternal universe, something running down, which we know is the second law. Everything that is made of matter is in a state of corruption. It's in a state of entropy. That's why things have half-lives. Everything's going this way. Nothing's going this way. It's all going that way. So something going that way could not have been eternal in the first place. At the rate that it's going, it would have ceased to exist. I'll use their terminology, billions of years ago. It doesn't work that way. See, the physics, the absolute observation contradicts these things. Hubble's expanding universe, we don't have time to do the expanding universe. Once again, I talked about something can't come from nothing. According to Stephen Hawking, the idea that the universe came from nothing leaves him no reason to have to explain anything. He gives his reason for having that belief in the first place. He just now realizes that the universe can't come from nothing. Why? Because in the genetics of nothing is only nothing information. Right? I know this blows theologians' minds, but I know this is rocket science, but in the genetic information of something is something information. That's why something can always produce something. See, so according to the genetics, Steve, that they do know about, this makes sense, but it contradicts their theories. So therefore, if they have to keep coming up with an expanding universe. Once again, in an infinite universe with no beginning, then anything is possible. Life on other planets, Elvis in a different universe. A tornado goes through a junkyard, and at the other end produces a perfectly ready-to-fly Boeing 747 because of that. We're going to skip some of this. This is a cute one. Richard Dawkins is being interviewed by a Roman Catholic priest. Not that I'm supporting Roman Catholicism here. But he's being interviewed by a Roman Catholic priest. And Richard Dawkins is the one that started out the conversation saying, this is the last interview I'm going to do with anybody of faith. And of course, the priest said, well, why? And he says, because you all don't know anything about science. And he says, in my opinion, most Christians don't know anything about their Bible either. Now, that's hard to refute the second half. Okay? Because that's generally true. According to George Barna's polling, most Christians know very little about their Bible. As a matter of fact, he goes on, well, give me an example of something the Christian does. He says, most Christians don't even know what the first 4 books of the New Testament are. And I couldn't argue with that because I know my older sister, if you ask her what the first 4 books are, she'd throw in some reindeer. Okay? That's the way some people are. You mean Donner and Blitzen? Or, Okay, anyway. So he says, so you won't talk. He says, so you won't talk to them because they don't know anything about the Bible. Yeah. And so the priest turns to. I have on the series. I have the actual recording, by the way. I can't play that here. I didn't set it up ahead of time. But the actual recording of the interview is on the series, only about a minute long. So then he turns to Richard Dawkins and says, Mr. Dawkins, I've really admired you all your life for the things that you've contributed to the scientific community. He says, as a matter of fact, I've done a little study on you, and I found out that your favorite book since you were 5 years old is Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. Is that true? Oh, yes. I was raised in that book. That's my favorite book. He says, I bet you I've read that book, 50 times, over and over and over. Never get tired of reading that book. And he says, well, Mr. Dawkins, can you tell us the original title of Origin of Species? And Charles Darwin goes, oh, yeah, it's called Origin of Species or the Preservation of... oh, God. Let's see, let me think. Oh, God. For like 10 minutes, he calls on God, over and over and over again in this interview. And you just can't help but belly laugh as he calls out to God to help him to quote this title. It is a pretty long title, but the reason why they eliminated it, of course, is because of the racism in the title. The preservation of the favored races. Well, guess who that is, okay? And so they kind of eliminate that. That wasn't a politically correct thing to say. And so it's an interesting interview, and I've got 15 minutes here. Okay, pbs.org. Here we get into the information thing. What if the fundamental stuff of the universe is not matter or energy, but surprise, information? This is the fundamental stuff of the universe. It's not matter or energy, which is abundant, obviously, in the universe. That's basically fundamentally all the universe is. But it comes forth from information. which is what the Bible says. In the beginning was the Word, and God spoke. PBS.org, Scott Aronson said, and I quote, "Does this mean that our universe is made of information, as some headlines claim? It strikes me as a contentless question," which is an odd use of the word contentless, but anyway. Says Aronson, "To say that matter and energy are important in physics is to say something with content. You can imagine a universe barren of matter and energy, after all. Specifying that our universe is furnished with both tells you something about it, and in distinguishing it from other possible universes. But I don't know how you could ever conceive of a universe without information." They understand the concept. They understand it in the physics and everything that they work with. But when it comes to what is displayed to everybody else, you'll find out that a lot of people on the left live their personal lives very conservatively. But when it comes to running everybody else's lives, okay? Yeah, give everything away. Oh, not my money. Give everybody else's money away. Okay. But the same works religiously as well. Most atheists and evolutionists are not looking for proof or evidence at all. The idea of a creator of all that exists is not really the problem. They want a God who fits their image and is convenient for their lifestyles and desires, whatever that is. From a purely this is just my words putting up on the screen because I don't remember them all. From a purely scientific point of view, the problem is not God, a designer, or creator, or even a savior, which is what the evidence points to. I'm going to reiterate that. Atheists really don't have a problem with the existence of God. They really don't. They really don't have a problem of a creator that created all this stuff either. They don't even have a problem with God taking on flesh and dying on a cross to forgive them. That's not their problem. The real problem from them is that this creator of God requires something from them. He gives instructions for good and evil. In other words, their real problem is the Torah. It's interesting to me that the same problem that has faced the dominant religion in America for 2,000 years, which they reject, is the same thing that the atheistic culture rejects. They don't have a problem with a God that does wonderful things and loves them and does all kind of stuff for them, but the idea of telling them what to do, telling them what's right and wrong and clean and unclean, that's where they can't swallow that idea. So that's why ultimately they reject God, is because he tells them their creator. It's like Geppetto telling Pinocchio what to do or whatever. Most atheists know all the details of Pinocchio but reject Geppetto. Okay? If I can just use Pinocchio as an example. I got 10 minutes to do some of the ontological arguments. Okay, is that okay? All right. Okay. I got to quote Richard Dawkins. I didn't want to do this, but Richard Dawkins, quote, "If the universe were just electrons and selfish genes, meaningless tragedies are exactly what we should expect, along with equally meaningless good fortune. Such a universe would be neither good nor evil in intention." That is fundamental, foundational atheism right there, and existentialism. That is the foundation of it. There really is no evil. There really is no good. Logically, that would have to be the way it is because there's nothing, everything's just made of matter. And in their opinion, matter in and of itself can't do anything good or evil. And so therefore, the universe is just filled with these genes and protons and atoms that don't have any concern for other genes and other atoms and protons and neutrons and quarks and as you break these things down. So the universe we observe has precisely the properties we would expect that there is at bottom. No design, no purpose, no evil, no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Can you start to get what they begin to see about the universe they believe in? They believe in a universe that's blind, pitiless indifference and doesn't care. So you can't imagine why the people who believe in that may come to the conclusion that they don't care. I'm only throwing out this possibility. Science has no methods for deciding what is ethical. He's right. That is a matter for individuals and for society. Science cannot tell you, for example, whether abortion is right or wrong. Ethical and moral issues are up to individuals and society. We are all dancing to the music of our DNA. So the fundamental things of atheism is there is no evil and there is no good. And that's quite obvious. If there is no evil, then no one would have any concept of good. And if there was no good, you'd have no concept of evil. You would have nothing to measure it against. And that's their bottom line. So therefore, in their view, life is just rolling the rock up to the top of the hill. And then when you get to the top of the hill, you roll it back down. And that's life, just rolling it up and rolling it down. There's no purpose to any of these kind of things. And so therefore, we wonder why. They have to deny that evil exists. Evil assumes that something should be different. I wish we had time to do the philosophical part, but these are the things that really get at the core of individuals. Because at the bottom line of all this is that, once again, what we've always asked, where did I come from? Why am I here? What's my purpose? Where am I going? That ontological is just a fancy word for the existence, the meaning of existence. Evil assumes that something should be different. So the fact that something's wrong to us is saying to us, well, there must be something right. And we know that wrong is not something we want, and so something should be different. In a godless universe of only nature, there is no ought to be. There is no, well, there ought to be a law. Well, no, everything's working just with pitiless atoms in the universe. There's no ought to be anything. Everything's just doing what it does. No design, no purpose, just doing whatever it does. And so, let me give you some other examples before we go on. Oh, here's my favorite one. If God exists, then why is the world filled with... Let's deal with that for a few minutes. If God exists, then why is the world filled with... And you fill in the blanks. Evil, war, bloodshed, innocent dying, whatever, diseases, whatever. Put it in there. Now, the first thing you have to do is take away their assumptions first, because every time they ask something like this, there's something that they're assuming right off the bat that you have to break down. Are you with me? Because otherwise, they'll lead you down the rosy path of never being able to answer their question. So you've got to know, you got to break down that first thing. Here's the first thing I asked them. What is it about God being good that means he cannot allow suffering, evil, or death? You've got to ask them that at first. If God is good, then why is there suffering? So what you're saying is, where does it say that God can exist along with evil and suffering? You see the assumption they're making? They're assuming that if there's a God, then there should be no evil and suffering. And where is it written that God can exist at the same time as evil and suffering? Now, we would all respond, of course, with him, well, God didn't create it that way, right? God created it to be good in the first place. So their response is going to be, well, then why didn't God just make it without the ability to sin? Why didn't you just make everything perfect in the first place? Now, here's the first thing I say to someone who says that. You're always living in the hypothetical. Liberals always live in the hypothetical. They're not really living in atheists. I don't want to consign. There are liberals who are believers in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I don't mean to confuse those two. Okay, but the point being, those who are on the left side of the view are atheists, generally speaking. They live in the hypothetical. They're not reacting and responding to the observable real world that we live in. Is it possible for God and suffering to exist at the same time? So let me end with this. A whole lot of things I would like to do. Let me end with this one. Oh, let me say one more thing. One of the other questions is, the only reason you're a Christian is because you come from a Christian country. You ever heard that one? It's the only reason why you're a Christian because you live in a Christian country. If you lived in India, you'd be a Hindu. Okay, right? If you lived in China, you'd be or in Japan, you'd be a Shintoist or a Taoist. Now, here's the problem with that. When someone says, the only reason you're a Christian is because you live in a Christian country, the first thing you ask them is, where do you live, sir? Then why ain't you a Christian? See, you've got to break down the initial assumption. The reason why you're a Christian is because you live in a Christian country. They live in a Christian country. Why aren't they Christians? Now, see, here's the response, because I already know it, been there, done that. Because they believe that they're better than you are by nature, then they're going to say, because I'm smarter than you people, I'm able to figure out that it's a scam, okay? But you still, once again, you have to break down the assumptions. You can start to have a discussion with them if you break down these walls of these assumptions in the first place. Like God can't exist and evil at the same time. Oh, what I was going to tell was my last story. When I was a young man, when I was a boy, 8 years old, living in a small town in Missouri, there was no Disneyland, there was no Disney World, there was no Six Flags over anything, anything like that. The best thing, the most exciting thing that we did 3 times a year in Jackson, Missouri, this little town that I live in, was when there was a parade in town. When you're 8 years old, that's the highlight of your year. And I remember my parents were the kind of people that we'd be out there 2 hours ahead of time. And we set up these lawn chairs, and we have a grill, and we have those styrofoam things, so forth, full of sodas and everything. And Dad would be out there grilling hot dogs and everything. When you're 8 years old, this is constantly what you were doing for 2 hours. Right? Okay? And you look out there again, and your mom would say, it doesn't start for 2 hours. Why are you'd be bawling out with your parents, and you'd still be doing this because you were excited. Oh, this is the parade. We don't see anything like this. And then pretty soon, the last time you look, you hear, dun, 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 dun. Oh, you get all excited and all ready to go. Here comes the band. Here comes the band. Now, when you're 8 years old, get out of here. You want the band to get on down the road. Why? Because the band just plays music. You're waiting for the fire engine. Because the fire engine is going to what? Throw candy out in the street, and you're all going to rush out and grab the candy. And so you're waiting for the fire engine. But here's my point of the stupid parade story. My point is that when you're 8 years old, the only thing you know about that parade is that short little time that band passed by you, or that float passed by you. When you're 8, you don't know where the parade went, and you don't know where it came from. And so every judgment you make about that parade, good, bad, right, or wrong, is based upon that little vapor of moment, if you will, in which the parade came by you. But if the Father knows the beginning of the parade and the end of the parade. Now, I think I mentioned this in the beginning. And so therefore, every judgment He makes based upon His wisdom, which is collective experience and knowledge over time, everything He knows about it, every judgment He makes is because He's got all the information and we don't. We got to start there. He has all the information. That's what it means to trust in God. That's what it means to trust in your mom and your dad. That they may tell you some things to do when you're young that you don't understand. You think they're cruel. You don't know why they won't let you stay out till midnight like all the other parents let their kids do, that kind of thing. And so therefore they're the most terrible people on the earth. They come to you and they tell you if you make your bed every week, and if you don't, I'm going to ground you. And so you don't make your bed and they ground you and you're mad at them. You sulk in your room for days, calling them every name in the book, screaming at them, yelling at them, when you're the one that put yourself in the room. They just made the rules. And so I'm pleading with us to understand that even though there's a whole lot more details in the series itself, and I'm not trying to get everybody to rush over and grab that, but I am saying that there are answers to every one of these things. And I think it's high time that we started preparing the next generation for the possibility that Yeshua may not come when we think He is. And so let's spend the rest of our time here being good, honorable, kind, gentle, decent human beings. That's what I think we should be searching for. Father, in the name of Yeshua, I thank You and praise You for Your precious word. I thank You that, well, I'm going to ask you to lay your hands on the heads of every one of your firstborn here. It's dark outside. Please guide them, everybody home. Guide them to the left and the right and take them home safely so we can all gather together in fellowship once again. I'm asking You to prosper all of us in everything we set our hand to do. That we proclaim that not only do we love You, Father, and that we love our neighbor as ourselves, but we love ourselves. That You love me. And You want everything good for me. And You want me to succeed in everything I set my hand to do. Teach us to be Your disciples and to take up our cross and follow You. In Your precious name, amen and amen. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Have a great evening.